Seemly I'm live. I always have a slight doubt on this one. Let me just check on the various channels that I'm meant to be going live to. In that one. And yeah, for those of you who know me, look at me, I'm early. Hey, there's a first time for everything. Right, so I may not even be live. I may be talking into the ether. I suspect there's a few minutes delay. There you go. I'm live on data one. And scroll. Sorry, guys. Can't do two things at once. You know me. You're with me. There you go. Yay! Brilliant. Seems to all be working. I'll give it a few minutes for everyone to turn up. But I thought I'd start this. We've been talking about doing like a species spotlight for a while. And a mini rant while we wait for everyone to turn up. I thought, well, I'll go on to Amazon and I'll see if there's a little ebook that can be downloaded. That's a decent overview of care of angelfish because I think they are interestingly specialist, but I don't want to say this without sounding stupid. They're both a very specialist fish, but that's accessible to everybody if you choose your fish carefully. Great breeding project if you choose your fish carefully. So anyway, decided I'd bob on, see if there was a nice generalized care thing that everyone could have a little read of. Brilliant. Yeah, after 3 that were clearly written by AI, I got a little bit fed up, and they really were clearly written by AI. One person in, like, the last few weeks has managed to put out 50 different books on fish keeping, on, like, really specialist topics. They're an expert in everything from angels through to arowana, bettas, goldfish, you name it. So that's a little disappointing. It already has been pointed out to me a few people that maybe I should put a booklet together on these things, so yeah, watch this space. Um, yeah, Straight Talking Exotics has said Pterophyllum are incredible fish to keep, grossly misunderstood. Alton's my favorite. Need long arms for water changes, though. Yeah, and we are looking at a tank space. I think where they suffer is they've been in the hobby so long that they're common, and I genuinely think that's it. Um, Remind us, how many species are there again? There are 3. Technically, there are 3. Yeah, again, something I'm going to talk about in a bit. Right. Is there anything on Facebook? Hello, Daniel. Brilliant. So clearly people can see me on both channels. So jumping right in. Pterophyllum, the terror in your tank. Yes. Complete play on words. Interestingly enough, Pterophyllum is actually the pteron is for fin and phylum is for leaf. It's not anything to do with like terror. We seem to think that the word comes down from that one. They were discovered really early on in sort of your fish keeping adventures. Top of my head, 1824. Could be wrong there. The Pterophyllum bit is put down to Haeckel, as in Haeckel's discus. So you can see that sort of thing. They are cichlids. So they are in the same family as your Riff Lake cichlids, cribs, discus, pike cichlids, Oscars. But interestingly enough, Oscars aren't actually that. If you look at the divisions on the sort of the tree of the cichlid family tree, Oscars divide off to them closer than discus do. And this round, flattened shape is for a very particular purpose. Where they live in the Amazon River basin, a lot of the forest will flood yearly. And that means that in the river itself, there's often a tangle of tree roots. And in dry air season, when they're having to actually live in the river, it's quite barren. Well, barren. There's roots, there's leaves, there's not a hell of a lot of plants. There will be some, but it's not sort of like what you see in a really well planted tank. In the flooding season, the season where it's flooded, they will go into the forest and they'll live amongst the semi-aquatic plants. So these plants are used to spending a few months underwater and then drying back out again. Still a rainforest, but not being flooded. So that thin body, laterally compressed, allows them to get between plants, to get between tree roots when they're in the main river channels. They like slow moving lakes and things like that. And I've got it here, but one of our first drawings in the field of angelfish actually has a little note by the guy who Epistogramma Agassiz is named after. He's got a little note in the thing saying that they were found in a lake to distinguish them from being in a river. Sorry. We had a comment there. Allows them to hunt cows alongside discus too. So there's an often thing that discus keepers feed a lot of beef heart. And the question is, do discus hunt the cows or so yeah. That's where that joke's coming from. So this is one of the first images we get. Obviously, the fish would have been preserved in probably formaldehyde or an alcohol, and then they were sent back to I'm gonna say it was Berlin. Could be wrong there. I'm sort of this is off things I've read sometimes months and years ago. You can see that it's the traditional shape we expect of angels, very rounded. When you see wild fish, they're a much more rounded body with those lovely, long, graceful finnage. This one particularly is the common angelfish scalar, or scalare. I can never remember which way people want to pronounce it today. That just your normal bog standard angelfish that you see in the hobby. We think. Interestingly enough, if you look just below the dorsal fin, you can see there's a little blotch. Now, normally throw that blotch in, and I'm going to say Leopoldi, which is one of the three recognized species that we generally refer to it as day. Jumilii, I think is how you pronounce that one. You'll still sometimes see those being sold. They're just Leopoldi. So you got common angelfish, Scalaria, whatever it is, Altum, and Leopoldi. Common angel was recognized in the very early 1900s. I want to say about 1908. Your Altums, 20s, and then Leopoldi wasn't really fixed until the 60s. Which leads us to a problem. The very early breeding projects, first recorded breeding of these guys in, I'm going to say Europe, but I think it was in the UK. The guy had a tropical pond. There was a local public aquaria, I don't know which one, which was struggling to keep these alive, but they were keeping them quite cold for angelfish, probably low 20s. So these are wild fish. They've been taken from the Amazon. They've gone on a ship across the Atlantic, probably. Maybe could they have been flown by then? Doubtful. And then dumped in a tank in the UK that was too cold. So they were transferred to a tropical pond where they started to breed. Crucially, they were only really aware of angelfish just existing. We're tending to agree now that common angelfish is more of a complex because we know that Manicapore, Orinoco are different enough that we can recognize them. Whether they're the same species, whether they're subspecies, whether they're species in their own right, we don't know. So yeah, I thought that was a good one to include. And this would have been how they would have recorded a lot of the things. What's the book? So Remembering the Shape of Nature or something like this. If you've got, it comes up on most like Scribd or I think I read it on Scribd, so you can read it. It's quite good. And it talks about this Agassiz going out and checking everything, and so keeping them. Your common angelfish, which I'm going to keep referring it to, it's not as low a pH as people tend to think. It's found more in rivers, and I mean slow-moving rivers. It's not as black water as people tend to assume. It will thrive in black water. Just because it eats neons doesn't mean it actually lives in the same conditions as neons. So, soft water, pH 6 to 7, it has been found lower. KH 2 to 10, which gives you a nice range. Temperature 24 to 30. If you want to breed, I'd say 26 to 28 is pretty much ideal. Although, having said that, I'm pretty sure I've had angels that would breed in a pond, as in outdoors in the summer. They do like it heavily planted. They are a prey species. They're a predator of small fish, but they are also a prey species. So they quite like that heavily planted where they can use that body to what it was evolved to. Think about that, a stripy fish underwater where the water's all ripply, light sort of you know how light sort of tends to ripple a bit underwater? Imagine that. Maybe a little tannin stained and they're sliding behind these tree roots or in between plants or something like that. And remember, these guys are in big shoals. Fantastic thing about angels is if they are attacked by anything, and there's lots of big other cichlids and other fish that are coming in, piranha are a great example. They'll form a circle all facing out so that any fish coming in has to go onto them head on. And it's a cichlid. It's gonna attack back. The thing with angels is they get tiny mouths, so they can't do as much damage as other cichlids. But they have these defensive strategies that come from being in groups. And like I say, I've seen groups in 50s easily, maybe more. And remember I said right at the start, they suffer from having been in the hobby too long. They need more space than you think. I don't think I'd keep angels in anything less than 200 liters. And to be honest, that would be the bare minimum, probably while they were babies. A fully grown angel with all its finnage can be a foot tall. So you need a tank that's what, double that? So, or at least 1.5 times that. So you need a tank that's 18 inches to 2 foot tall to keep them in. They're not fat, they're not darting all over the place swimmers, but they do like to move around, and like I say, quite big cichlids when adults. So give them space and give them a group. And if you give them a group, have space to split at least a breeding pair out of there. I tend to find when I keep them minimums of 6. It's not more normally like 10, 12. I'll get breeding pairs. They do try and mate up relatively for life. Yeah, you'll always get pairs. You say, "Oh, they mate for life," and then you get an absolute sod who picks out 2 females and goes between them, or you get a couple that squabbles and seems to break up. They seem to sort of go for the human side of things, where sort of for life, but if something else comes along, they'll definitely consider it. So have that nice big planted tank, and can you imagine how stunning this is? But then really be careful with your tank mates. Don't keep them with small tetras. They're just a snack. And I know there's those AI books I was talking about. Did you know if you put guppies and angels together when they're very young, that they can thrive together? Oh, and mollies are the best tank mates. That is utter rubbish. They don't need super soft. They do like soft. Things like guppies and mollies are hard water fish. Don't keep them together. Don't keep them with things like neon tetras and cardinals because that is what they eat in the wild. It may take a while before they get big enough to start snacking on them, but they still will, and they're still going to be putting those tetras in a prey situation constantly. So maybe consider some of your bigger tetras. Be careful though. I've had aggressive angels that would just kill tetras for fun. They've had to just live with other things. Corys, I am quite a fan of with angels, but make sure they're big enough. So don't think about the pygmy Corys because despite having a lovely little spine that'll stick in a cichlid's throat as it goes down, um, angels will still look at them and go, "Well, give it a shot." So make sure you pick something big, far too big to even be considered a snack by the angels, and they'll get on really well. As in, they'll ignore each other. But the main problem I find with them is they are so easily stunted, and a lot of the ones you're getting in just from the shops, genetically, they are dire. They are horrible. I'm just gonna actually skip forward a bit, actually, talk about this one. So this is the example, taken off eBay years ago. Don't know if the eBay seller's still around, but yeah. Can you see that the fish is almost a triangle? So when you're going to look in there, there's a couple of things. That eyeball is far too big for that fish. So that just like with discus, if the eyeball is very big compared to the fish, that's a sign it's been stunted. That eyeball is far too big for the fish. It's also a triangle. I'll show you the next fish of a similar age. In fact, this one might be slightly younger. That's a smoky ghost angel. We will look at the genetics in a sec. Can you see how that's round with those lovely big fins? And that's the thing you're looking for babies. You want to know what genotype, what genes it carries, if you especially if you're looking to breed. But also make sure you're getting them nice round fish with an eye that's in proportion to its body. Because I hate to say, let's go back one slide. That eye is far too big for that body size. I don't like how red the gills are, and I don't think that's blush. Sometimes you get it called a blushing angel, which has a red patch there. I don't think that is. I think that's just been exposed to ammonia at some time in its life. And if you look at the finnage, see the feelers? That fin should be far longer than those. You see here how that bottom fin extends far beyond these. All in all, that's just a much better quality fish. And yes, you're going to pay a bit more for that fish, but it's going to live longer. It's going to look far more stunning. It's going to be healthier. So you may not be having to treat it. It's likely to get to its adult size. It's likely to get to a decent age. Now, we say 10 to 12 years in captivity, but they've hit 15 in the wild that we know of. So they are quite long-lived cichlids. So if you pay, say, £10 more for a fish that's going to live as long as your average dog will, then it's worth considering. And they'll probably breed if you keep them well. So better to have something that you know the genetics of so that you can sell those fry at a relative premium. Right, so you've gone out and you bought your angelfish. You've chosen something that looks more like that, or even that. Yeah, I know it's sitting down on the bottom of the sand, but still, you can still see it's got that nice long finnage, the nice extensions on the back of its tail. Not that. If it looks like it looks like a triangle. Don't avoid it. Avoid it at all costs. Also, be careful. There's something called notched angelfish. I couldn't get any photos for it. Have a look online. Just stick in notched angelfish, and it looks like something else has come along and taken great big chunks, bites out of it. Or sometimes they've got a hole all the way through their body. That is just pure bad genes, and it gets passed down quite readily. They're now being bred deliberately and sold into shops for people to go, "Oh, I must rescue that." Don't. They're being bred deliberately for that one. Um, so on YouTube, we've got, I've only kept wild caught. Would your run-of-the-mill store grade angelfish achieve full wild potential size? I doubt it. I strongly doubt it. Having said that, I've seen the occasional one get decent sized, but no, I doubt your run of the mill store one would, and I think it's because they've been exposed to nitrates in a lot of cases. I'd always say to people, if you can, go and buy your angels from breeders. If you can, get hold of a decent breeder. So join the British Cichlid Association, ask around who's breeding decent angelfish at the moment, anything like that. So you pick your two, and like I say, we'll talk about genetics later. And the next question we get is, do I have a male or a female? And this, as you can see by the watermark, is James Studdart's work. And these are the incorrect things that you will get told time and time again. These large extensions on the caudal fins. It's genetic, generally. If they've got the veil tail genetic, they will have longer caudal fins than anything else. The nuchal hump on the forehead. Yes, when they're in breeding condition, you might get a slight nuchal hump on a male's forehead, but when they're coming into breeding condition, it's a very specific time. You're not going to get that straight away in any way, shape, or form. Forks on the pec fins. No, not really. I've seen males without it. I've seen females with it. If you've got something sticking out, and I won't try and name anything just so I don't get hit with any strikes on either platform. That can be a poo. That can be a prolapse. It might be the ovipositor. if they're actively breeding. But if they're at that stage, check which one's laying the eggs. That's your decent clue. Um, Body shape, all that sort of thing. No, generally not. It's not ideal. The only one that most people will agree that they've found is the creases, and this can be done when they're much younger. Males will have a double crease. So if you take the leading edge of the eye and go just up, that should be where the forehead starts to slope up. Again, looking for those nice rounded fish that have got a clearly defined bend before it hits their nose. A single crease would be a female, and a double crease will be a male. Again, it's leading into that nuchal hump because a male sort of his forehead comes out more, it makes them more rounded, but that tends to be the better way to try and identify them. It takes practice though, and I'm not very good at it. So please don't anybody send me photos and say, is this or male or a female? Because I'll generally be going, well, I'm confident it's a fish, and that will be your lot. Right. So what about, so you've now decided you've got a male and a female. I mean, like I say, my personal choice, go find a breeder. If you can, join your local fish club. Start talking to breeders. Ask at your local fish shop. They may know who the breeders are. Maybe travel to one of the better fish shops that's more involved with the community. Or, if you can, getting wilds in, unless you want a particular morph or with particular genetics. Get yourself a group of quite young. I get them as young as I possibly can. As soon as they're starting to look like they're definitely getting the right colors, because then I can bring them on. I know that they're going to get exposed to less nitrates. I can control what food I give them. And breeders tend to be happy to thin out the groups at various sizes. Just have a chat with the breeder and see what they're doing. Get yourself a group of 6, say, or 10 or 12, and just wait for a pair to form. If you've only got space for the pair, that's fine, because if they're good quality, you can sell the rest on and often make yourself a nice little profit. You don't have to, if you're breeding for profit, you have to have a license. If you're just breeding for the fun of it and you're willing to give away the fry or sell them very, very cheap just to cover your costs, you tend to be okay. It's if you're making over £1,000 a year in total, not profit, in total. However, having said that, just have a talk with your local licensing authority. But let's say you're just breeding, you're giving most of them away. You can always take them back to the fish club auction. Yeah, nobody has any problems with well grown on, well bred angels with genetics that people are looking for. Right, so diving all over the place. Right, there is. There's one more below that, annoyingly, which is the platinum. Right, so we have different. Right, couple of terms. Genotype is what the genes contain. Phenotype is what you see. So you might see something like a smoky or a gold. There may be another allele, another little section of DNA. And they generally tend to get one allele off each parent, but these are all different alleles in different locations. So you've got the albino allele, dark gold, gold marble, and marble all on the same location. So they can only have one of them out those 4. Halfback, pearl scale, smoky, streaked, veiled are all in different locations. So they could have different ones of those. Zebra and stripeless are in the same location. And then hidden behind my face right now is platinum. There is some doubt about platinum. I do think it's there. I think we're reasonably happy that platinum's an allele. If you have 2 platinum genes, you get blue. Or as the fish matures, it gets very, very blue. If you've got 1, they go more platinum, silver. Zebra means they get more stripes. Stripeless means they get less. If you see anything described as a ghost, that tends to be stripeless. Veiled, if you get 1 gene, they get a slightly longer tail. If you get 2, they get extra long tails. If you see something described as lace, that tends to be a double veiled. Streaked, smoky. Smoky is where they get more of a smoke color all over the body. Pearl scale, the scales look raised. They're shinier. They've got more of a pearlescent. And it just looks a bit bumpy over the whole fish. Half black. The back half of the fish is going to be blacker. Dark. It's in the clues in the name. Gold, clues in the name. Gold marble is where you get marbling effect and gold. They often get a goldish head and then marbling over the rest of the body and marbling. An albino, it needs 2 genes. One albino gene, I think, does form dilute with some of the other locus, some of the other alleles. 2 genes, and actually they don't go pure white or so like an albino convict is almost pink. If you get 2 albino genes in the angel on this particular locus, the stripes go white. That's all you get. You get almost a silvery colored body with white stripes on it. Streaked is in the fins. One of those had streaked fins. It's this one. If you look on that guy, can you see that blue streaking in his fins? And that normally wouldn't show up. It's just the angle of light's course on it. That's got a bit of streaking in its fins. Can you see there's none in that one at all? So streaking is just in the fins, tends to mostly show up on darker fish. Okay. That smoky ghost I showed you has so if we look back at that, sorry, flicking back in between things. If we look at this guy, he's a smoky ghost. So can you see you've got that smoky color all over? You've got a bit of streaking in the fins, I think. The ghost, can you see his patterns massively reduced? We've got a bit over the eye, but the body patination's really, really been reduced. This guy's a blue ghost, so he's probably got 2 platinum genes and the stripeless gene. Again, a little bit of something over his eye. Interestingly enough, even ghosts, if you get them really upset or stressed, they'll still show stripes. Not as strong, but you can get a really peed off ghost to show you a bit of striping. Silver with blue gene. So he's wild type. So that's when we refer to as silver. And on the alleles, that's just shown as plus plus. He has got the platinum on a different allele, but only 1. So you're getting some of that blue through, but not completely. So this is what I'm saying when you want to know what the genes are. Now, how do we know that this one's got a blue gene? Because one of the parents was a platinum with the double blue. So this will probably have been more of a wild type bred to a platinum. So it'll had 1 gene for wild type and 1 gene for the platinum. Now, if you buy that and another one with the same genetics, then you can breed those 2 together. 50% of them will be carriers for the blue gene, 25% will be double platinum, so will show that lovely blue color as they get older, and 25% will just turn out to be wild type. And then it depends what you're breeding for. Sadly, 3/4 won't really show the blue gene as much, so half will show some, but not completely. Um, that's the problem with breeding, sadly. Okay, and I think that's got a bit of a streaky gene in because you can see the blue showing up in the fins. Now, if you look at something like this is the only photo. This is just one off the internet, totally own up. Stole that one off the Tinterwebs. Can you see it's got bit of pale scale on the body? Now, it's a rounded fish. You can see that nice little nose shape to it. However, those fins haven't really ever developed. This it's more what you see in the stores. I partly think that's because remember when I said right at the start, Leopoldate didn't come into the equations until Leopoldate and Alton weren't really identified when we were doing that first breeding. We're not 100% sure that the common angelfish is the true type, and it may be that there are genes of the other 2 mixed in, and Leopoldate doesn't have anywhere near those much flourished on the fins. So it may be that's why some strains of angelfish in the hobby look like crosses. There may be some crosses in there. We don't know because they just didn't keep the records, what, 100 years ago when they started breeding these guys? They were just all angelfish, and they were impressed they were managing to breed them. And yeah, it is impressive that 100 years ago, they were managing to, with hardly any of the techniques that we use and technology that we use today, even things like electric heaters and dechlorinator, still managed to get them. First lot were eaten by the parents, I think, or did they all die? First lot all died, second lot, I think, were eaten by the parents, but then quite rapidly, they managed to get free swimming at least. Okay, so breeding. Pick the right parents, and this is gonna save you a lot of heartache. If you're the sort going, "Oh, everybody deserves a chance," No, not with breeding. You are deliberately picking adults to put together, pick the best ones to give the fry the best chance, because you will get between 100 and 1,000 eggs a week if you are raising them yourself. You are not raising 500 eggs a week, 500 fry a week. You're going to have to be selective. So let's select for the best things possible in our fish for health and that you can get them into a good home because they've got good genes behind them. And that may sound horrible if you've never really thought about this sort of thing, but you're not raising them all anyway. You can raise the fry or you can leave the parents up to it. Sadly, due to commercial breeding, a lot of angels don't know how to raise their own fry now. In rams are another buggers for doing this. They just haven't got a clue on how to raise the fry. What can be really good is to get a captive male and a wild type female, and you do the same with angels, have one wild parent and one not. You'll find a lot where people go, "Ooh, there's very few wild type parents, wild caught parents in the hobby." There's not as many as the farmed ones, but they're available. They are very much available. The LFS, near me has has them in reasonably. And you can always ask for them, talk to your LFS and say, "I'd like some wild caught angels," and they may be able to source them for you. You don't get as much choice. It's sort of a case of wild angels turn up looking like wild angels. But remember, I've had wild angels in I had one in and he had an awful break to his fin, but it wasn't genetic. It had been broken in shipping, I think. His fry were lovely. I never had any problems with his fry, but he was never really a display fish, which is fine. He lived out his life in a big tank in my fish house, and I used some of his offspring as display fish. It was great. So you may find that the fry themselves that you have to raise the fry. I leave in slates, just normal roofing slates on an angle. They'll clean it off, condition the parents with live food, lots of decent water changes. I tend to breed them it depends on the size, and I'm saying this. Angelfish will breed from about 6 months if you've been keeping them right, sometimes a bit younger. I don't bother till they're at least 6 months a year. Mostly because I wanna see what they type I mean, I may know I'll know the genes, but you'll still look at some and go, "Nah, nah, nah." You can go and live off in a nice community tank with someone else. So 6 months, a year-ish, I'll start looking at breeding them. Um, by that stage, I'd expect them to be at least 20 centimeters tall. So I can't put them in I don't even put them in 18-inch cubes. I did used to have some really good 22-inch cube tanks, and I used to use that for my breeding pairs, but I'd condition them in a bigger tank where they lived, so they'd normally live in a 4B2B2, 4B2B18, something like that. I've still got that 4B2B18 that I used to use to raise on angels. And then as soon as a pair had formed, we were really starting to think about it, transfer them into one of the cubes, like I say, about 22 inches, those cubes. Nice sandy bottom, plenty of hiding places, and these a slate lent up against it. Condition them with lots of live food, lots of nice clean water changes. And to be honest, angels are really easy to spawn. They clean off the plate, and then the female will go along and deposit the eggs, and the male will follow and fertilize them. Great. If they don't know what the hell they're doing, they'll then leave it till they start moving, and then they'll go, "Ooh, live food," and eat it because they're idiots. They also suffer from, like a lot of cichlids do, they forget that they've got fry, so you turn off the lights and the fry move, and they go, "Ooh, snack," and eat. Or you turn on the lights and the fry move, and they go, "Ooh, snack," and eat. So, not always the smartest of critters. I used to give them a few tries. Remember, they'll recondition themselves in a week, so a month of trying, and then I'd go, "Right, I'm raising them, am I?" In which case, I'd just remove the slate straight into the next tank, which was normally a grow-on tank. Few days, and then the fry will be wriggling, and actually, it looks like all the eggs are just sort of like wriggling. That's why they call them wrigglers. All the eggs are just sort of moving a little bit. They've still got the yolk sacs then. Don't feed them too early, you'll just foul your water. If you know that your parents aren't laying at all, yeah, remove it as soon as they've got eggs. Now, it used to be, we'd say, "Put a couple of drops of meth blue in," until we discovered that meth blue, once as soon as the eggs start hatching, there's any meth blue in there, it can cause massive deformities in the fry. So I'm not a fan of it anymore, having discovered that. So consider tannins instead. Indian almond leaves are probably my go-to. They don't need to be as heavy with the tannins as you would with sort of bettas or gouramis, but a little bit in there is really handy. I know it's working really well with Corys, so consider that. But generally, as if you keep doing water changes with the eggs, don't let the eggs dry out, don't let the water fall below the line of the eggs. If they're reasonably near the surface, you're just gonna have to do lots of small frequent water changes. That's life, I'm afraid, with this sort of thing. Um, but in an ideal world, I like it if the parents raise the fry because then they probably won't breed again next week. If they're decent parents, they'll raise that group of fry on, and then just keep an eye out for when the next group of fry are being laid, because then you've got to get those out. 22-inch tank, something like that, and this is a cube, remember. That gives you a bit of leeway for starting to grow the fry on. But here's the crucial thing, you keep them in too small a tank, even as tiny little things, you keep them in too small a tank with high nitrates, you got problems. So what I do is if I'm raising the eggs on, fry sometimes struggle to find food. So I get maybe an 18-inch by 12 tank, eggs in there, air stone, a little bit of a sponge filter. As soon as they're moving around a bit, and I'm doing daily water changes or sometimes 2 and 3 times a day for small water changes, um, quite soft water, I will start feeding them, and my fave things are water worms, grindle worms, baby brine shrimp, not too much on that one. I'm careful not to let any of the salt go in the tank. Daff is always one of my favorites. I tend to put Daphnia in and just let it go wild in the tank anyway, because that gives a constant source of food in there, and the Daphnia will be reproducing themselves, great, and wingless fruit flies, absolutely fantastic option as well. The only problem with the fruit flies, you've gotta wait till the fry are really free swimming so they can get up to the surface to eat them. Vinegar eels for that very, very tiny first stage, but they tend to be big enough to bypass the vital bit of vinegar eels. Things like rams need that sort of thing. I'll then have them in there till maybe 2 days free swimming, and then I place that whole tank as a whole into, say, a 4-footer. Um, and that 4-footer, normally the back wall I've let go really gunky and algae. It's got, like, a nice healthy algae growth. And that has nothing to do with the fact I frequently grow on my bristlenose plaque with them as well, no, nothing to do with that at all, but it allows a lot of creatures to grow in there, great source of food for them. Normally absolutely packed with Daphnia. Keep a light on for them. They're buggers for they do like a bit of extra light. It grows stuff in the wall so that they can filter feed out. And at that stage, I also introduce things like apple snails, because apple snail poo is effectively fry food. Also, they will munch on and eat up any dead bodies, any excess food that's laying on the floor, especially when I do start taking them onto dried foods. So now they're in a 4-foot tank. The next day, the bulk of the strong ones will have escaped that little tank I've placed inside. Have a look at what's left. If you've got belly sliders, if you've got things that are struggling, check. It may be that the bulk of the group are in there still, and that's probably then they're not strong enough as a whole. They're not old enough to get out. Um, but yeah, putting the whole tank in allows the belly sliders, which is sad. They're just never going to swim. Allows me to remove the tank a couple of days later. I sometimes leave it on the side to see if the few that are still in there do manage to make it up and inflate their swim bladders. If they don't, then I just euthanize everything that's in that tank. But like I say, you have to be selective. So at this point, anything that's kinked, anything that's notched in fact, if I get notched in there, tend to not then breed from the parents because I think that's a problem. So in the first few weeks, I'm starting to look for anything that's got any problems and removing those. Because if you keep too many, you're going to stunt all of them. And at this point, you should be saying, say you've bought pairs planning on getting double-veiled blacks or half-back blacks or something like that. That's what you should be aiming for, and you can soft cull, and by that I mean you can sell decent fry that aren't the colours you're aiming for. Um or if anything's got any genetic problems, hard to go. Right, so, as I mentioned before, the common angel scalare, group, I, like a lot of people, I'm not convinced it's all one species. They may or may not be Manickapore. I love Manickapore angels. They may true Manickapore may be their own species, and I do lean that they are their own species or at least subspecies, but we do see that red back in a lot of wild caught angels in other areas, so it may just be they've an isolated pocket that just happens to be breeding those red shoulders really, really strongly. But when you see the wild ones, they're lovely, long, tall fish, and I think they look closer to Ultums than they do the standard angels. They're not Ultums, they are in no way Ultums, I can tell you that, but just that first glance makes you go, "Ooh." And I'll be honest, whilst most people say they'd keep Ultums in a big tank, these guys, Manickapore, are probably on my hit list for possibly having them. There's also Orinoco angels, they're in Rio Orinoco. Isolated population, but their stripes are much thinner, so are again they a different species? We used to say there was only 2 species of Oscar, quite recently we've decided there's at least 6, maybe 13. I think angels are going to be the next on the list. I think the only reason they haven't become split sooner is because we've all been arguing over how many species of discus there are. Again, discus is recognised as about 3, possibly 6, possibly more. So, yeah, angels are in a very similar place. Let me just check for any other comments. Oh, we're still doing alright. Right, so these 2 are definitely different species, and I'm actually gonna pause on that one. That photo, on the left that I've sort of put as Ultums, I'm not 100% sure they are Ultums, and that's something that you should really be careful of when you're buying Manickapores and Ultums. There is also a species of Scalare that is called the Ultim angelfish. They are not, Pterophyllum ultum. They are Pterophyllum scalare ultum. Again, maybe a subspecies within that. They just look a bit more ultum-like. I went to a fantastic talk a few years ago where he discussed in minute detail the difference between Scalare and ultum. And I can't remember any of the reasons, and it does you do have to get your eye in a bit, and it's really annoying because I know people will be watching this probably on playback going, "Oh, it's super simple, you just need to do this, this, and this." I'm not that good at doing it, but be really careful of when you're buying them. Again, talk to cichlid experts, join the British Cichlid Association, try and get hold of the people who really know what they're talking about. Ultims, you are going to pay a lot of money for a group for. So spend a bit of extra time and have a chat with people and see if you can get the expert to no fish shop should object to you saying, "Can I take a couple of photos of them? I'm going to send them to someone I know online who's going to authenticate whether these are the right or not, and I'll get back to you." And like I say, I can't see people any fish shop objecting to that in any way, shape, or form. Sorry, guys, I'm just checking comments on 3 different places. The other one is Leopoldi, much less common in the hobby. I've seen some being advertised today. They're being sold as, Jumilai, which is the old name for Leopoldi. I think they're Scolari. Having had a quick look at them, I've gone, no, no, they look Scolari." It's a now if you look at, the Leopoldi, that's the one on the right, can you see that they're on the dorsal fin, it goes much further forward and there's less of a complete stop? Yeah, that's also a sign of poorly bred angels, poorly bred Scolari, so, again, be really suspicious when you're being sold these, especially with the price tag on them. They are being sold at 30 quid each, and they were really poor quality in the photo of the best one I could see, and again, I don't think they're Leopoldi, I think they're Scolari. So, common angelfish being sold under a fancy title. I mean, you can't do anything about it because the genus the species doesn't even exist now, it's been, um, sort of wrapped up under Leopoldi. Yeah. As a bloodthirsty person to name a fish after. Ultims, you know how I said, Scalari, the common angelfish, can take being in, 6 to 7? I wouldn't keep Ultims anywhere near that. I would aim for about 5 with Ultims, especially if you're wanting to breed them. I've heard of people breeding them, taking them even lower, but they are stunning fish when you get a nice group of them. Absolutely amazing. They do get much taller. Because they're in general coming out the wild, I do know of a couple of people who've bred them. So they're not I'm not saying if you get people saying they've bred them that like you hear people say they bred clown loaches all the time, yeah, that's probably rubbish. If you someone who knows their stuff says they've bred Ultims, yeah, believe them. Just check whether they're talking about Ultim Angels or actual Ultims. Um, if you've got a big tank and soft water and you don't mind faffing around with your water a bit and you want to set something up for something that will look amazing, these are probably the guys for you. Consider having a second tank for breeding because if these guys want to breed and you can get it going, that would be so rewarding and so worth it to do. Really, really would. I would say, again, because these guys are mostly gonna be wild caught, you're probably going to rely on live foods more than you are dried foods. Um, but the feeding habits are reasonably similar for all 3. So, they are mostly eating insects and small fish. They will also remember I said point out that there's a certain period of time they spend in flooded forests, so things like snail eggs will be on the menu, which is why if you look at apple snails, which come from sort of the same sort of region, apple snail eggs are actually toxic because there's a risk of things like these trying to eat them. But you can I mean, if you wanna breed anything, for snail eggs, giant African land snails, they lay quite a few eggs, and the eggs are fine for great for fish food. And again, something you don't really wanna be breeding a lot of, so get some of them, start breeding them, great source of eggs. As soon as I get the fish house back I had to let all my land snails go when I moved, but as soon as I get the fish house back, that's why I keep land snails to feed the eggs off to my fish. Ant eggs are another thing to consider, and that's really funny to say because ant eggs used to be oh god, I'm dating myself here. Ant eggs used to be one of the main things we fed to our fish. Your little tiny tub of ant eggs, and you take them proudly home. Yeah. Yeah. Don't do that much anymore, but again, something you can consider. I would Yeah, when I'm breeding these guys, I definitely have a good stock of live food, but even if you're not breeding them, still consider it. This time of year in the UK is great. Get a bucket, stick it outside, see what grows, and you'd be amazed. I've got mayflies trying to lay in on my ponds right now. I'm quite pleased I haven't got many mozzies laying in my ponds. But yeah, can be absolutely fantastic. I also feed to my larger angels very, very small earthworms, so I have wormeries, and I pick out the small ones and chuck them in for them. Yeah, they they will do the gross thing that Oscars do, which is they'll eat them and the worms will start to come out the gills. Yeah, yeah. One thing to be yeah, and can you tell the train of thought here? That reminded me. One thing to be careful of is they can carry a heavy worm burden, especially the farmed ones. We tend to go to the wild caught ones, no, it's farmed ones. And I have had Manicoporean with, Camelina worms. So if you're getting them in before you add them to your main display tank, make sure you worm them. Escherichia X, any of the commercially available fish wormers will be absolutely great. Keep them in quarantine, worm them, give them that chance to show you whether they've got anything going on, and you should be fine. If you're getting on some very small fry that are too young to worm, I would isolate them till they're old enough to worm. I really, really would. Have a separate grow on tank. It's much easier. You're going to be doing a lot of water changes anyway. Yeah, no harm, no foul on that whatsoever. But yeah, absolutely fantastic fish to keep. Consider the tank mates carefully. Don't keep anything that'll nip their fins, like tiger barbs. Remember that they are big, flat-sided fish, so things like Siamese alligators and Chinese alligators, whichever one is the nasty one that the shop's trying to sell you, they will definitely consider having a munch. They're not as tolerant to things like nitrates as people tend to think, so don't keep them with big, messy fish. You often see them as an add-on in, like, plec tanks. No, give them Give these guys the center stage. Right, guys, throw any questions you have up here now, and I will do my best to answer them. But also, let me know what other species you'd like me to do a bit more of a spotlight on for probably next week. Or maybe no, I think we'll leave it a week and do it the week after. I will also be writing some of these up independently. So if you just want a bit more information on something but you don't think alive, just let me know in the comments. Um, but other than that, I'll pretty much let you go. I'll just give you a week or so. And to answer the question, are they angels or devils? They get stuck in community tanks where they don't have space and they get aggressive. And that can be a problem. There is also evidence that the dark gene or the half black gene may carry aggression with it. So you get a double dark gene and a double half black gene. You may have a really nasty fish. I tend to find veils are a bit more aggressive than the others, but that may just be because they've got long floaty fins that they're trying to um, keep hold of. But they are not your peaceful community tank fish. But like I say, give them the center stage. I think one of the best fish you're ever gonna keep. Sorry, guys, I'm just checking the comments quickly. Right. Okay, yeah, guys, thank you very much for joining me. I did have hmm, I sorted out my cup of coffee link. Tell you what I'll do. I will cheat and I will put it in the comments myself. If you've enjoyed it and you want to buy me a cup of coffee, I would be incredibly appreciative. And I say this as in I'm actually gonna get a cup of coffee. No, I'm not. I'm gonna spend it on all the other things that I tend to. I need a coffee link. Um, can you tell the camera in front of me? I can't see where I'm actually doing it. There you go. Yeah, as you can imagine, it costs a fair bit to run the website and run the streaming software and cask and all this sort of thing. So if you've enjoyed it, a cup of coffee or whatever you can would be absolutely amazing. If you want some, don't forget we have the podcast, Tropical Fish Keeping UK. It's on Apple, it's on Spotify, it's on everywhere it seems. But if you want to get it a little bit early and with more of the swears left in, subscribe on Patreon because when I go on a rant, it's on there. Okay, guys, thank you very much. And I will see you on the group on Thursday.